Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video number 336, my final thoughts on the Salem witch trials. I've been reading a lot and actually editing one work right now called Lectures on Witchcraft. That one's by Upham, the one that was actually refuted by the dude, I can't remember his name, who did Cotton Mather in Witchcraft, kind of defending Cotton Mather and his father, Increase Mather actually, contemporary to the time, for their involvement in what happened at Salem during the witch trials there. Now of course, you probably know the basic story of Salem, Gallows Hill and all these things, people claiming that imps and demons were tormenting them and that members of their community were witches, and a number of different theories regarding Salem I think all fall short, and here's why. None of them are all-encompassing. They're all very limited. So you have the it's actually witchcraft theory, which posits that the devil went down to Georgia, but first he stopped by in Salem. Then you have the it was all horseshit related to essentially ergotamine poisoning. That is, you have a population that's largely reliant on grain. You have a really wet season. Ergot grows on the rye or the wheat, whatever they're growing. Sorghum especially, vulnerable as well, along with barley. They eat it. They start experiencing hallucinations, St. Elmo's fire, burning pain in the limbs and so forth. Seeing weird shit, and then witchcraft is spawned. There's the idea that there were actual witches of a Wiccan variety. This goes hand in hand with the feminist reanalysis of some Victorian academia, including A.E. Waite, with regards to the gypsies and groups in Italy, actually. Wrote a whole book on that, on, what was it, I can't remember, Gypsy Fortune-Telling or something. Had several works. The idea was that there was a witch cult tradition that, having been exported, you're talking basically not about maybe a full-on version of witchcraft, certainly not dancing in the twilight with the devil, but folk magic. So herbal medicine, especially abortifacients, the use of mind-altering substances, simple folk charms, especially of a curative white magic sort, that they were being persecuted by the misogynistic, in some interpretations, the misogynistic, outdated, fundamentalist Christians were going to the more worthy people in society and persecuting them. You've got other theories as well. Another main theory is that it was property disputes. That is, that if you look at the people accused and the people accusing them, oftentimes there appears to be some correlation, at least for the first stages of it. At the end, they end the witch panic partially, hush-hush, because of this, according to this theory. That is, that they were trying to kill off people in order to liquidate their property. That is, that the more wealthy, powerful families and their diaspora really wanted to force some of the other people out of the community. They started by targeting some vulnerable old women and shit, kicking them out of their property. Proctor actually gets pressed to death because he refuses, because he gets wise to this, and then not too long after it begins to disappear because someone declares that the wife of the governor is also a witch. Well, clearly the legal authorities didn't like that. Now, I would like to point a few things out. Number one, my overarching theory is that it was a number of different things. I think ergot did play a role, because it's entirely likely that once the panic began, I believe the panic began because of property disputes. I agree with that. Once people became panicked, though, there was no longer any malice required. People interpreted minor symptoms that they had anyway but didn't notice because they were malnourished and frequently exposed to ergot. There's a lot of drunkenness, by the way, etc., etc. Some of them got a hold of Datura or something. When they saw weird shit, or when they got spooky at night and under the Halloween moon, they dreamed up witches. Well, there was no malice there. They were simply misinterpreting something we would understand in a scientific context. Panics can do that. We have that same problem today. Misogyny probably did play a role situationally because the witch-finder generals were always male, and they were enabled to go into the cell and strip the largely female people naked and check them for witch marks and poke and prod them and do whatever they wanted. There was an additional corruption. The sheriff there was somewhat illegally confiscating property. And then, of course, afterwards, not too many years later, you have a full-on apology by people that were in the community and in law and so forth saying, oh, we made a tragic error. God forgive us. We sent dozens of innocent people to the gallows. One of them got crushed to death in his backyard by rocks. Whoops, that's okay. And then there was some attempt at restitution and stuff, which kind of takes the malice and property part partially off the table, which again is why I think it was initially started that way but not promulgated that way. It got out of hand. What was initially an attempt to kill off a few people or exile them from the community to take land, for the church mainly, failed and backfired miserably, and then started killing off their own families, and then things got worse. But several points. Number one, I'd like to say that I do believe that Cotton Mather is an enlightened man of his time, interested in Newtonian mathematics and all these things. I don't believe was of the superstitious sort, but you have to understand, he goes into a community and he's trying to analyze things. He's seeing things through the lens of someone from his era, so from several centuries ago. Their understanding of science, especially medical science, was not the same, or of lunacy. To them, being religious, even enlightened and scientific, it was self-evident, because you read the Bible, you were raised on that like milk and honey, that there were witches, that there were demons capable of tormenting people. I don't think that that was malice. I think that was just a misinterpreting of physical evidence that he himself was privy to, that was being witnessed and accounted for at the time. Number two, again, some of the people in litigation were clearly motivated by malice. Misogyny or a desire for more money or power. Again, the sheriff of Salem clearly comports to this, was literally violating the local law by confiscation, but facing no repercussions for it, I think. And also, there was another mini panic that took place in New York and Pennsylvania somewhat before Salem happened, the outbreak of witchery there. And I think that gave the initial idea that the fact that people could be hanged for witchcraft and that there was no real way to exonerate yourself once accused, as long as you put on a good show, I think the kids were in on it, by the way, I think that gave the idea to the more wealthy within the Salem community. They were literate enough, they would have known that these other persecutions were happening. They said, well, if it worked there, it can work here. I'm coveting my neighbor's land, so I'll kill my neighbor. We'll just say that old Mrs. Cratchit over there is practicing black magic and she has a cauldron that's of some mysterious sort. But the witch finders will never find it because it's invisible when she's not using it. But just trust us. A little cat goes to and from her house and whispers to her at night and teaches her magic spells. You couldn't falsify any of these things. So they took it and they created this panic. Also, again, I think the main vector of the panic spreading, though, was not malice. I do not believe that the property dispute and or witch cult misogyny sort of angles work except possibly as a catalyst for beginning the witch trials themselves. Also, a lot of people have said, well, the children didn't know what they were doing. No, I think that they did. They were getting attention, playing a fun game. They were probably told it's a fun game. And just keep it up, don't worry, we're getting land, we're getting money, and you get to have fun and skeeve on your duties for the foreseeable future. All you have to do is dance around when other people are there and have a pin in your mouth at all times so you can pretend to vomit it up and stuff. I think they knew what they were doing. There was some repentance from some of them thereafter. But I think they were instructed by their parents, at least initially. Later on, it wasn't required that happened. And also, keep in mind that very few people spoke out until after the legal authorities began tamping down on things. Shows us the nature of fear. We still have this today. We have this as in a microcosmic sense even on the internet. If you get labeled a Nazi or problematic or something, a lot of people that know better won't say anything about it. There's a very steep divide between those people that will speak out because they just don't give a shit and people that won't. And unfortunately, most of them are in the latter category. We all know that most of the people banned off social media, they're not witches. They're not actually Nazis. They're not hateful people. They're not trying to promote violence. They're not doing anything illegal. They're not doing anything wrong. But there are very few people who are willing to stand up to the modern-day inquisitors, the witch finders, with their modern-day anti-Hexenhammer, I would say this time. Now, it shows us the nature of moral panics. So that's my final thought on Salem. It's replicating itself literally as we speak. We're living in history, and a lot of people don't even realize it. That's about all. Peace out.